appreciation.
Yes. And you can cancel it.
But I remember
But we don't.
what is like 3 weeks.
Well, then now the city replaced with which is 2 monitors.
We don't want that.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Carol Johnson, and I'll be your lay service leader today. Our opening words are from Barbara Peskin. Because of those who came before, we are. In spite of their failings, we believe. Because of and in spite of their horizons, of their vision, we too dream. All of our announcements were on a slideshow before the service. If you didn't see them, don't worry. Matt will post them in a link tomorrow in his daily sharing. Today in the studio, we have Michael Reason on piano, Matt Alspaugh, our minister, technical support by Charlie Jacobs, Lou Crippen, Robert Barnett, Roy Haynes, David Hugnall, and Chris Gang. Participating remotely, we have Linda Jessen singing with Trudy Crippen and Colleen Beery providing remote tech support. So I want to welcome you all with live from Fellowship Hall. It's the I knew I was going to wreck this, LCUUF Sunday service. Now, Lou Crippen, the president of our board, has some words of appreciation. 'Cause 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 '
Thank you, Carol. Your board of directors at our last meeting decided to formalize our appreciation for all of the people who are working so hard every Sunday and Saturday and sometimes during the middle of the week. So we've written this letter of appreciation. Thank you very much for the enterprising and dedicated volunteers, both on-site and off-site, who make our Sunday services possible. Our on-site volunteers include Kat Barnett, Robert Barnett, Roy Haynes, Jan Manning, Charlie Jacobs, Michael Reason, and sometimes myself. And our off-site volunteers include Richard Clark, Colleen Beery, Trudy Crippen, Paula Odom, and Pamela Cuccinell. The LCUUF Board of Directors is grateful for and appreciative of the hard work, creativity, and diligence that you put into providing our online services each Sunday morning. Without your persistent and innovative efforts in dealing with computer software, computer hardware, cameras, microphones, and at times intermittent internet service, we would not be able to meet each week to celebrate our beloved community. Muchísimas gracias a todos.
And now, let us light our chalice, as well as those of you at home who have one. The words from our chalice lighting today are from Deborah Burrell. Fire consumes and casts a bright light. May our chalice flame consume our regrets for the past, our fears for the future, and our worries about today. May it light for us a path of joy and peace. Our opening hymn this morning is number 121, We'll Build a Land.
Build a land where the captives go. We'll build a land when we bind up the broken. We'll build a land where the captives go free, where the oil of gladness dissolves all mourning. Oh, we'll build a promised land that can be. Come, build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, and then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream.
Each week, we take time to remind ourselves that we belong to a community who cares for each other. We do this by sharing any significant joys or sorrows in our lives. If you have a joy or sorrow to share today, you can type it into the chat and we'll read those aloud. First, let us voice our sorrows or concerns, whatever you or the world may be holding that is in need of our healing and caring thoughts. It looks like no one has. All right, Lou has one for us. Oh, all right, it's a joy. Glad for the joys. Okay, we don't have any sorrows this morning, but let us now recall the joys, whatever you may be celebrating, whatever evokes a feeling of joy or peace for yourself or others. Michael has one joy that he'd like to share with us first.
Morning. Some of you may know that about 6 weeks ago, I instigated a GoFundMe campaign in support of the Musica para Crecer, which is based in San Juan de Cosola. This is the wonderful music school that's going on there, and I know many of you know them because they've had the choir here several times. Unfortunately, government funding at all levels was cut recently due to a reorganization of the various cultural departments and a different focus on funding. This left the school in a very difficult situation. How do they continue to provide this wonderful musical education that they do, but without the money? So I felt, and also the orchestra, the Lake Chapala Community Orchestra, felt very strongly about this, that we have to, especially in the times of pandemic, that we have to still encourage musical education. So I set up the GoFundMe campaign. The GoFundMe campaign closed on August the 31st, and I know several of you contributed to that, of which I am very grateful. Donations were received from Mexico, of course, the United States, Canada, and Europe. I presented a check to the organization earlier this week for over 50,000 pesos. And I am very, on behalf of the orchestra and Musica para Crecer, I am very grateful to everybody that supported this truly worthwhile cause.
Lou has a joy to read from the chat box.
Two, actually. One from Dee Dee and Larry. Joy, Dee Dee and Larry are happy to be back in Ajijic. Great to be here. And one from Colleen. Teddy, my rescue puppy from Korea, had a successful surgery for a fractured leg yesterday and is resting comfortably.
All right, and now we will light our care candle. This candle from our care team represents sorrows that are too raw, too difficult for us to share aloud. So many of us have had losses, partners, children, grandchildren, losses that remain present with us every day. We will light this candle for all those unspoken sorrows. And now, Sue Kelly will offer today's presentation.
I am standing on the
of the ones who came before me. I am stronger for their courage. I am wiser for their words. I am lifted by their longing for a fair and brighter future. I am grateful for their vision, for their toiling on this earth. We are standing on the shoulders of the ones who came before us. They are saints and they are humans. They are angels, they are friends. We can see beyond the struggles and the troubles and the challenge when we know that by our efforts things will be better in the end. They lift me higher than I could ever fly, carrying my burdens away. I imagine our world if they hadn't tried. Wouldn't be here celebrating today. I am standing on the shoulders of the ones who came before me. I am honored by their passion for our liberty. I will stand a little taller, I will work a little longer, and my shoulders will be there to hold the ones who follow me. They lift me higher than I could ever fly, carrying my burdens away. Imagine our world if they hadn't tried. We wouldn't be so very blessed today. I am standing on the shoulders of the ones who came before me. I am honored by their passion for our liberty. I will stand a little taller, I will work a little longer, and my shoulders will be there to hold the ones who follow me. My shoulders will be there to hold the ones who follow me.
Good morning. Wasn't that a wonderful video of women, many Unitarians who have made a difference in our lives? You will notice that Carol and I are wearing white this morning in honor of the suffragettes. On August 26, 1920, 26 million women had their citizenship affirmed and gained empowerment for themselves, their families, and their communities. Additionally, the 100th anniversary of the Woodrow Wilson signing the 19th Amendment coincides with the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington. Many Unitarian Universalist men and women were involved in both of these endeavors. However, this morning we're going to concentrate on women's suffrage. As UUs, we must understand the wisdom of the men and women who came before us. I am sure, like me, you have heard and read a lot about women's suffrage recently. When I was asked to do this talk, I thought, okay, I'll just look up a few names and be done with it. I started looking, and I found over 100 names of UU women involved in either civil rights or suffrage. We do not have enough time to talk about all of them, so I picked a few. Some of them you will know, some of them you will not. I hope we all know about Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton and the Seneca Falls Convention, which kicked off the women's suffrage movement. If not, we have a very good book in our church library about this. I highly recommend it. But do we know about Harriet Stanton Black, Elizabeth Cady Stanton's daughter, and her granddaughter, Nora Stanton Black Barney? And do we remember Lucy Stone, Olympia Brown, and the Blackwell family? I have included all of the Blackwell family women because they were all involved in suffrage. Lucy Stone was born on August 13, 1818, in West Brookfield, Massachusetts. She is known for being an abolitionist, suffragist, and promoted women's rights with her writings, which she published and distributed. This at a time when women were discouraged from speaking at all. In 1847, she was the first woman to graduate from a college in Massachusetts. She encouraged Elizabeth Cady Stanton to act on her interest in women's suffrage. Lucy Stone helped organize the American Women's Suffrage, the organization that first built support for the suffrage movement. Also, she helped initiate the first National Women's Rights Convention for women's suffrage. In 1855, Lucy married Henry Blackwell. Later in this talk, we will discuss the entire Blackwell family. Lucy and Henry, at the time of their marriage, have a private agreement preserving and protecting financial independence and personal liberty. This prenuptial was very unusual at the time. In fact, without it, Lucy would not marry. In 1854 to 1858, Lucy toured the United States promoting women's suffrage. After the Blackwells had one daughter, Alice Stone Blackwell. After the birth of her daughter, Lucy limited her speaking engagements. Elizabeth Cady Stanton said of Lucy Stone was the first person by whom the heart of the American public was deeply stirred on the woman question. Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and Lucy Stone, all Unitarians, were called the 19th century triumvirate of women's suffrage and feminism. Harriet Stanton Black was born January 20th, 1856. She was the daughter of Elizabeth Cady Stanton. Upon graduating from Vassar in 1878, she went on the lecture tour circuit with her mother. When she married William Black, who was English, they moved to England. Harriet returned to the U.S. in 1902. She, her mother, and Matilda Jocelyn Gage wrote The History of Women's Suffrage. Harriet founded the Equality League of Self-Supporting Women, which became the Women's Political Union. Their mission was to record working-class women, and their membership did include 20,000 factory workers from New York's Lower East Side. In 1910, Harriet organized the 1910 suffrage parade, pickets, and marches to focus attention on the suffrage movement. She had skill in neutralizing Tammany Hall politicians while interacting with society women. She was successful, and in 1917, a constitutional amendment was passed to give women the right to vote. By August 18, 1920, the 2/3 majority of states needed to ratify the amendment was realized. President Wilson had no option but to sign it into law on August 26, 1920. Now listen to this carefully. I was absolutely floored. Mississippi would not ratify this amendment until 1984. Harriet Stanton Black was alive during our lifetimes, as she died in 1940. Nora Stanton Black Barney, daughter of Harriet Stanton Black and granddaughter of Elizabeth Cady Stanton, was born September 30th, 1883, and died January 18th, 1971. So she too was alive during our lifetimes. Nora was the first woman in the U.S. to graduate with a civil engineering degree from Cornell, and the first woman to become a member of the American Society of Civil Engineers. She had an engineering career while working for women's rights and suffrage. She was president of the Women's Political Union in 1915. She organized labor activists, spoke to crowds of voting men, and lobbied the New York legislature for a suffrage bill. Olympia Brown was born on January 5th, 1835, in Prairie Round Township, Michigan. She was a suffragist and the first woman to be ordained as clergy with the consent of her denomination, Unitarian. She was an advocate for women's rights and one of the first generation suffragists that was able to vote. Olympia Brown attended college at Mount Holyoke, but was very unhappy as there were too many restrictions there on women. She was told by a professor, "You're not expected to remember all this, just enough to make you intelligent in conversation." Because of her dissatisfaction at Mount Holyoke, she moved on to Antioch College in Yellow Springs, Ohio. While there, she managed to persuade her hero, Antoinette Brown Blackwell, to speak. Notice all the Blackwells appearing throughout this talk. In 1861, Olympia Brown went to the Theological School of St. Lawrence University. She was the first woman to graduate from an established theological school, which she did in 1863, and later that year she was ordained as the first female Unitarian minister. Olympia Brown dedicated her life to the suffrage movement. Because of her extraordinary speaking skills, she traveled with Lucy Stone and Henry Blackwell. She formed the New England Women's Suffrage Association in 1913, and in 1913 she joined the new Congressional Union for Women's Suffrage, which would become the National Woman's Party. This was the group that initiated the idea of an amendment to allow women to vote. An amendment was passed by Congress, but President Wilson did not want to sign it. Women marched at the White House and were arrested and jailed, tortured, and force-fed when they went on hunger strikes. The jailing solidified support for the 19th Amendment, and women continued to march until Wilson signed. Olympia Brown died on October 23, 1926, being one of the original suffragists to vote. The family of Samuel and Hannah Blackwell were a multi-generational family who over the years were or supported abolitionists, doctors, educators, musicians, women's rights supporters, and suffrage supporters. Samuel and Hannah had 9 children, immigrated from England to the U.S. They were committed to social reform. I will give you a thumbnail sketch of family members who were inactive suffrage supporters before we discuss the active ones. Anna was the oldest sibling, having been born in 1816. She was a spiritualist and wrote essays, articles, and booklets and poetry in France, where she settled. I hope most of you know Elizabeth Blackwell, who was the first female in the United States to earn a doctorate in medicine. She was influenced by Unitarian transcendentalism. Her main influence in the medical field was in disease prevention through social hygiene and sanitation. Elizabeth, along with her sister Emily, who was the third woman in the United States to graduate from medical school, in 1860 opened the Women's Medical College of the New York Infirmary and the Infirmary for Indigent Women and Children. They employed all women physicians to give them the clinical experience they were denied by male-operated hospitals. As we have discussed earlier, Lucy Stone married into the Blackwell family when she married Henry Blackwell. Once she gave birth to a daughter, she curtailed her speaking engagements, but continued her interest in the suffrage movement. Antoinette Louisa Brown Blackwell in 1856 married her friend Lucy Stone's brother-in-law, Samuel Blackwell. Antoinette was the first woman ordained as a Protestant minister, Congregationalist. Later in life, she would become Unitarian, perhaps when she became a Blackwell. Antoinette was outspoken on the subject of suffrage from the pulpit. She was a frequently honored guest at suffrage parades. Alice Stone Blackwell was born into the Blackwell family as the daughter of Henry Blackwell and Lucy Stone. Early on, she dedicated her life to the suffrage movement. At age 16, she was writing articles for the Woman's Journal, the magazine founded by her mother. By the time she was 26, she was the editor. When her mother died in 1893, Alice took over as editor-in-chief of the magazine. In 1890, she worked on the merger of the American Women's Suffrage Association. She was their recording secretary for 20 years. In later life, she used her poetry and writing skills to further humanitarian and progressive studies. Voting is an obligation as well as a privilege. It took almost 100 years for these women we have talked about and many others to secure this right for us. This was the first women's mass movement in history. I'm not sure they were aware of the power they were unleashing. It was a turning point where in the past women were not allowed to function politically. Women's suffrage supported the growing interest in gender equality, increased social spending, job opportunities for women, fairer wages, education along with sex education, and birth control. I hope hearing about these proud and courageous Unitarian women, along with their men, will make you as proud to be a Unitarian as it does me. However, we must realize that standing in the shoulders of these women, it is essential we continue their work, especially at this time and just before an election, as we see the current administration attempt to gut voters' rights at the state and federal levels. It is our responsibility to maintain the freedom to vote for everyone, no matter what race, sex, or gender the voter is. This is imperative to allow our democracy to continue.
Thank you, Sue. That was fascinating. Our closing words today are from John Lewis. Do not get lost in the sea of despair. Be hopeful. be optimistic. Our struggle is not the struggle of a day, a week, a month, or even a year. It is the struggle of a lifetime. Never, ever be afraid to make some noise and get into good trouble, necessary trouble. And before we extinguish our chalice, Lou has another thing to say.
Thank you, Carol. I'm not sure how I did this, but in reading the list of names of people that we wanted to thank, I somehow inadvertently left out Linda Jessen. And for those of you who listen every Sunday to her beautiful voice, I really apologize, Linda. We're more than happy to include you.
Now it's time for us to extinguish our chalices. We extinguish our chalices with these words which we read together. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we keep in our hearts and share with all the world. Thank you, Michael. Please stay around if you want for discussion. We'll start with small groups of about 8, and you can turn on your cameras and unmute yourselves. If you want to leave your group, you can click Leave, and you'll come back to the main room. You can have a discussion there or ask to go to another room. This concludes our service. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of people. Nice bill.
No, I'm